Welcome to ICTICT401, which is Determine and Confirm Client Business Requirements. In this module, we will look at how to gain the knowledge of a business system that either has an issue or the client wants something new. So the basic steps of this is to determine the basis of the need or the problem for the business, gather information concerning that need, and then get confirmation by the client for that need. So what's a business requirement? You have to define what the requirement is, its boundaries, the scope, and develop a method to be used in defining this. So we need to determine which method best suits our process of gathering information about the problem, create and ask the appropriate questions of the business to resolve the problem, and define the objectives and expected outcomes to be achieved when we put in the solution of that problem. We need to document it all in a form so that the business can take that to a vendor for obtaining a solution, and we basically need that documentation to be approved by the client so you get paid. So when we're looking at the business needs, we need to look at all the areas within a business and determine which areas are impacted by the system requirements, and we need to describe the area and the impact on that area. Now, in identifying the business areas, and we will start to identify our stakeholders. Now, our stakeholders are anybody that is impacted by the change. We need to look at what type of influence over the problem they have or the solution, and where they fit within the organisation. So typical use of organisation charts is to show work responsibilities and reporting relationships between the various members of staff. This allows leadership to manage growth and change within the organisation. It gives employees, especially new starters, a quick overview to understand where they fit in the organisation and who their direct reports to are. So it basically becomes a visual directory for all the employees. And this is a typical org chart that you will come across. So it basically has the person's name and the position title, and underneath is the people and the positions that report to them. That's known as a functional or top-down org chart. It reflects traditional business structure with the executives and the managers at the top as you come down to the various people that report to those managers. It can and is more than likely broken up into the various departments within the organisation, such as finance, human resources, marketing, research, that sort of structure. The next type of organisation chart is divisional, where you can either have it broken up based on geographic location or effectively product lines, if you like. So in this example, we're looking at a car company, and we have a division for SUVs, sedans, electric cars, and administration. And each of these, they have their own IT, research, manufacturing, marketing, customer service. So there's a lot of repetition in this type of divisional organisation. It's not centralised. So that's just a brief description of what we just talked about on the last slide. Next one is the matrix org chart. So in here, it's a little different. We have, it's basically split up into projects. So a consulting firm is normally one that would be like this. So a person can have multiple reports. So they will report to their functional manager, which is their traditional manager if you look at a functional org chart, but they also report to their project manager. So in this system, all the people that report to a project manager for a particular project are listed going horizontally, and the vertical reports to their functional division managers, which is their base manager. So which method of gathering information is best for the organisation and you determines how you develop the questions and gain that information. So the normal ones are interviews, and then you got questionnaires, i.e. surveys. There are two types of main questions that you ask, and they are open-ended, where the person needs to give you a detailed explanation, and closed questions are ones that are more strict in their type of answer. So you limit like to a binary solution of yes, no. Okay. Group or community-based gathering is where you break up into smaller groups and you work together to resolve the solution. Quite often called brainstorming, breakout sessions, that sort of thing. Observation will be probably the most expensive way of doing it, because you have to actually watch the business process in action, what the workers are doing. Now, what they do in that situation is actually gather what is actually occurring compared to what the process documentation is reflecting. Strobe is a structured observation where you take into account all the particulars of the surroundings, such as the colours of the walls, the placement of the building, placement of equipment, so on. So you're looking at all the types of physical elements that go into it as well. So to expand on the question types, as I said, open-ended are the ones that leave the response to the person being interviewed. So an example there is describe any problems that you're experiencing. A closed question is one that limits the response. So in this example, we have 5 software packages listed. Pick the one that you use the most. So the bipolar questions are specific closed questions that are true, false, agree, disagree. So you can only give one of 2 answers. You then follow up with probing questions that expand on that answer. So you use it to clarify the answer if you weren't 100% sure of what they were getting at, or you want to concentrate on an element of that answer that they gave. There's many benefits to having a open-ended question format. It helps the person relax and express their opinions more freely. It reveals potential further avenues for questioning. It makes the interview process more interesting and provides you with more details. The drawback is that you get too much detail on a given answer, which can lead to a perceived loss of control within the interview. When you're doing interview questions, you need to have your questions prepared. So you need to come in there, otherwise you could be perceived as not being prepared and wasting people's time. So closed questions saves time, it's easier to analyse, it's very straightforward and allows you to maintain the interview very quickly and easily. Drawbacks, they tend to be a bit boring. The details that you get from that type of interview is very limited, so you may not actually pick up some of the little fine details that you may need to actually resolve the problem correctly, and it doesn't give the interviewee time to relax. So interviews can be formal or informal, and it allows you to gather opinions and feelings and goals from the person, as well as just a straight answer. So you get to analyze the person as well as the answer given. But you need to have your core questions and processes and that all researched before you go in, because you need to be prepared, because you need to interview a cross-section of the business, from the floor workers up to management and executives. So they need to be comfortable that you've spent time organising yourself and show the respect to the organisation. So to do that, you need to read your background materials and basically do a rough checklist of the information you want to gather, and ensure that you have a control of the interview, so you keep it moving and don't get sidetracked, and vary the type of questions being asked. So the general interview question cycle, so you basically come up with your list of major questions. You then, within the interview, you ask the question, you listen for the answer. This is very important. A lot of people have preconceived answers already. You've got to actually listen to what's being told by the interviewee. You need to analyse what they've actually said. You need to take notes on what you've gathered, and you rinse and repeat through the rest of your questions. Now, coming back to step 4, as part of your analysing of their answer, you may need to do follow-up questions. So there's a branch point there. And with that, we come into our clarification or our probing questions to get further information from their answer to that original question. And you've got a little sub loop. So you create your supplementary question, you ask it, you listen, analyze, and you continue that little loop until you are satisfied that you have a complete understanding of what they're saying. Now, the structures of the interview are starting from specific questions to more general questions, which is known as a pyramid type structure. The next one is a funnel, where you start with the generic questions and then hone into specific questions. And the most time consuming of these structures is a combination of both, where you will use both funnel and pyramid questioning, and that takes a lot more preparation and time. Next is questionnaires. Now remember, everybody really loves filling out surveys, so you've got to really ask yourself if this is the best way of gathering the information. So this may be a follow-up to information that you gathered from interviews, and you tend to want to gather large amounts of data and follow it up. So target the information that you want to ask for, and we would generally use these questionnaires if our target audience is widely dispersed. Group your questions so that they're logical in their sequence. You place the most important questions up front, which tend to be the least controversial, and always run a test on your questionnaire before sending it out, just to confirm that the people being asked the questions understand the questions that you are asking. So when you're looking at whether the questionnaire is appropriate, you need to ask yourself, is the audience widely dispersed, or do I have a large number of people that I need to get responses from on this particular occasion? Next comes our group or community-based method. So this is where we will form groups, focus groups, subject matter experts, that sort of thing. And we want to encourage collaboration within the team to get to a solution, or which is defining our requirements. So these need to be left to formulate solutions that may be outside of the box and quite creative. So you need to have that open environment where they're encouraged to come up and voice their opinions without being shot down. So normally we would hold these outside of the normal workplace so that the people are more relaxed, and we would come up with types of brainstorming. So this is a very old technique that I've seen and been part of for many occasions over the years. Using flip charts, whiteboards, post-it notes, anything to get information down and then put up in a visual way helps this process flow and explore. Now, if the organisation doesn't support team problem solving, you're probably not going to get support from management to take a whole group of people away from their business for a day to get this done. So you really need commitment from the leadership of the organisation. You need good communication skills to run a group session, and you really need a dedicated note taker to collate all that information as quickly as possible. audio-visual equipment in this day and age is quite required so that everybody in our group can hear you, especially if you've got multiple small groups in a large room, and have a schedule of how you want the day to go that's agenda driven, so that you can keep it moving and keep it on track, because these types of environments can quickly get out of control. The most successful one is observation, where you will come in and observe what the business process is while on a normal daily transaction. So this is to actually find out what the people that are doing the job actually are doing, rather than what the paperwork of the process says what should be done, because quite often those two things do not align. It also helps you to determine the true relationships between the various people in the organisation, and it helps you determine the fundamental business requirements of that issue that is occurring. You may also be able to visualize how those improvements that you need to come up with will actually work while you're observing people. So you might see something that is inefficient in the process and make notes of it so you can record it. So when you're doing a observation, and it's a very comprehensive one, we call it a strobe, which is a structured observation, and these observers are trained observers that need to come in and observe the entire environment. So they'll look at the office location, desk placement, stationary equipment in use, what the properties are, external information sources that impact the organisation. They'll even take into account the office lighting and colour effects within there, and even the clothing of the organisation in use. So we've done our gathering of information, and now we have to sit down and write the objectives of what we need to achieve. So it may be multiple objectives, doesn't have to be a large one. Remember, when you're goal setting, goals are set up of multiple objectives that can be achieved within a certain time frame. So what you need to do is keep it smart. So be specific, say how much has to be achieved and by when. It's got to be measurable, so that when you implement it, data can be collected and obtained to see whether the outcome has been achieved. So that leads in the next one, the A, achievable. It's got to be feasible to occur. It's got to be relevant to the problem that you've been tasked to resolve. You need to be able to have a clear understanding for the people to follow to make sure it's achievable. And as per the specifics at the top, it's got to be timed, because everything has to be achieved within a time frame for an organisation. So outcomes are whether or not we actually have met our objectives. So this is where we measure our goals, evaluate them against our objectives, and see if we've achieved the intended / or projected results that we've set out in this business document. So why do we have objectives? Objectives need to be developed to benchmark our progress. We need to show stakeholders that we are accomplishing things as we progress through the project, and it can work as a motivation and for people that are working, so that again they can see things occurring and they've got very clear goals to achieve as they progress through the project, and it keeps everybody focused and working towards the same goals. So the business requirement document is the document that this course is basically planned around you writing. So it focuses on the business perspective and has the details for the solution of the project. In basic terms, it indicates what the business wants to achieve out of this project. So the requirements document is to get agreement among the stakeholders, communicate the solution to any service providers of the business needs, and what they need to do to achieve those business needs and get paid for the project. So basic outline of a business requirements document, or template if you like. It should have a executive summary statement at the top, which is a very quick summary of the requirements of the project, and you basically write this last after you've written the rest of the document. Next becomes the project objectives. So again, keep them in the SMART format: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and within a time frame. The needs statement is what the business needs are for that project. In other words, what resources you need, that sort of thing. Project scope outlines and includes what should be done within the project. Financial statements, so the impact on the company's balance sheet. Everything's about money in business, so you need to have financial statements on how the project is going to be financed, what money is allocated to what steps within the project. Next comes functional requirements, which is details of the actual solution. So this includes any diagrams, charts, schedules that come into play. So the documentation to get the jobs done. Personnel needs, so this is our HR element, where we need to determine what people are required for the project, whether they need to be hired, when, and it also plays into the financial costs of the project. Next comes schedule, so we need our timeline and clear deadlines for the various phases of the project to be completed on. Within any business project, we make assumptions about how the information was gathered, what the outcomes are, and all this sort of thing. So any assumptions we've made, like delivery of a product will be within a certain time period, all that sort of thing needs to be documented within the assumptions section. And the last bit there, the cost and benefits, this is where you basically tell the business management executive why they need to do the project. So they need to see that there's a cost benefit for spending this money on this project. So basically we'll spend X amount of dollars to achieve a 10% increase within, the next 12 months, that sort of thing. All right, so you've done all this documentation, so what do you do with it? Well, you submit it to the stakeholders to confirm that you've outlined the problem correctly and get them to sign off on it. So basically, that's it for today's presentation. Let's just give you a quick outline of the next part of the course. Remember, this is a multiple week course, so we don't just do one presentation. So remember, this is an introduction to a much larger area of business, and that's project management. We are only going to be touching on it. This is part of the Cert 4, so we're not going to be requiring accurate quotes and things like that. So probably won't expect you to write all sections of the BRD. I'm not totally evil after all. Okay, gathering information is our next presentation. So basically we'll look at what gathering method you've chosen, how to record their clients' responses to the questions, how to analyze it, how to establish our specification, and analyze any physical requirements and impacts that our solution comes to, and how to document that information. So we'll look at a BRD document in a bit more detail. So client confirmation is where we seek, it's a multi-stage process where we check the documentation, make sure it's meeting the client's needs. We submit that documentation in a draft form to the client for review. They'll respond with any changes that they want, and then you submit the final documentation for approval to get the project kicked off. So within my learning space, we'll also have additional information on a PDF called Information Gathering. Now this is a marketing document, but it still goes through and gives you a slightly different look on the pros and cons of the different methods from a different perspective of gathering information from multiple sources. Alright, that's it for the today. Hope you enjoy yourself, and I'll catch you next week. Bye for now.